Hello, my dear friends. Good morning, operator Starsky here. I'm sorry about the delay. I was planning to start as usual around 11 o'clock, and I did only according to the British time. Okay, let's check out the recent news that we have because we have a bunch. We have some good, some not really good updates coming from Ukrainian and also some of the Russian media in Russian language as well, because we gotta all know and understand the language of our enemy, and basically this is why I'm here with you. Okay, hello Croupier, hello Newman, my good friend, and Michael as well. Hello to beautiful Melbourne. What do we have? We have some very interesting update coming from the Russian media regarding, and I'm talking about the Russian oppositionist media actually, regarding the Russian losses in Kursk Oblast last year. So turns out that 60 Russian conscripts died during the operation of the Ukrainian defenders in the Russian Kursk Oblast of Ukraine. So according to the reports, the Ministry of the Defense and Stolen Toilets of Russia didn't actually withdraw those conscripts from the dangerous zone in the Kursk Oblast, and basically they were caught off guard. So the journalists of the important stories, важные истории, they found that with the beginning of the Ukrainian incursion in the Kursk Oblast in summer 2024, at least 60 Russian conscripts died. And talking about the Russian conscripts, of course, we're talking about young Russian soldiers that are being basically drafted to the Russian army and thrown at different spans of the front lines that require, of course, presence of the professional army. But that's basically what Russians do all the time. Remember 2022, when Russians invaded Ukraine massively, there were hundreds of Russian conscripts actually taken as prisoners of war and shown on camera and brought to different TV studios and stuff where they spoke during press conferences. The average age of those guys is like 20 years old. They were conscripts from 34 regions of the Terrorussia Federation. At least half of them died during combat already during the first week after the beginning of this operation on 6th of August 2024, and they kept dying in combat until at least September. In September, there were no less than 20 Russian conscripts, according to this investigation. The total number of the Russian conscripts that died during this operation, during the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, according to different estimates, was more than 200 men, and there were also cases of self-elimination and murders inside of the Russian units. It's very important to remember because, again, when somebody admires, the great and indestructible Russian army, basically you can tell them that they are sending kids to war. They literally take those kids and plug any sort of hole in or gap in their front line, and they don't care if they die or not, because this is the way Russian empire functions throughout centuries. Next, we have some absolutely disturbing news from Kharkiv Oblast. Guys, please tell me your thoughts about this one, because I still cannot really understand the reason Russian terrorists did that on the first place. So in Kharkiv Oblast, there was a huge Terrorussia attack that took place overnight, and Russian terrorists hit a pig farm. It's actually a serious business because, as you can see on the pictures, the damage is absolutely enormous. And as a result of their strike, there were 20 impacts of the Russian drones, of Russian Shaheds, each carrying approximately 40 kilograms of explosives. So as a result of 20 hits of the Russian drones, 13,000 pigs died at the pig farm. Like we have some really crazy footage coming from that place, and you may ask yourself, why the hell would the Russian terrorists hit the food, hit like agriculture in Ukraine, right? Hit farms, and basically this is what they did, my dear friends, in 1932, 1933, basically trying to starve Ukrainian population with hunger during Holodomor. And I am actually not really surprised to see that, but I still just I cannot understand the way of freaking mentality you gotta have in order to strike like pig farms. Of course, as we understand, the losses, the damage in terms of return of investment, in terms of these farms' incomes and stuff like that, will be absolutely enormous, because 13,000 pigs that died during the strike. That's absolutely insane. We have rather interesting episode coming from, again, the Russian media. Remember, recently I did several reports on the Russian schools, all right? Russian schools that are falling apart because in 2024, according to the data coming from the Russian Ministry of Education, 1/3 of the Russian schools required a renovation, and not just like small renovation, but total renovation. And in 2025, the number of those schools increased to approximately 50%. So now, like basically every second Russian school requires a renovation in the Terrorist Federation. And there's like plenty of footage. You can see it yourself in Google. Basically, it's very easy. And yesterday, another interesting footage came from Russian Vladivostok. Vladivostok is far east town of Russia, where a part of the Russian College of Energy and Communications basically fell apart. As you can see from the footage, we have a sound as well. You can see from the footage that it collapsed for literally no reason. Turns out they were doing kind of, I don't know, changing pipes or something like that. You can see there's a Russian machinery over there behind the tree. But you can also see the result of complete neglection of Russian infrastructure, because, again, at this moment, there is absolutely nothing more important for the Russian terrorists than killing Ukrainians, waging hybrid war against Europe. Nothing more important than that. Neither welfare of their own people nor colleges, schools, and anything like that. So we have another update coming from Ukrainian monitoring channels. This one is from Ukrainian Telegram channel, obviously. The Trump administration is planning to provide Ukraine with intelligence data to help them strike Russian oil refineries on the territory of the Terrorist Federation, according to NBC News. It's so cool, my dear friends, to literally translate it on the go. Oh my God, I never thought I was able to do that. This will be the very first case when the United States of America extend their intelligence support to Ukraine. Since the return of President Donald Trump to the White House, according to the NBC, also Ukraine is expanding its cooperation with NATO in terms of intelligence and long-range strikes. United Kingdom is already involved in the operation and helps Ukraine to strike Russia, being basically asked for that by Washington. So how cool is that? I think it's extremely cool, and we will talk a bit more about some slight and absolutely subtle shift in rhetorics that I mentioned recently, that I noticed recently, speaking about the internationally wanted war criminal Putin, also known around the world as Huilo. We have some crazy footage coming from Kiev where a person was seen literally bringing a Russian drone in the truck. You can find a lot of them, I think, nowadays, because Russia only yesterday launched also quite a few of those, and yeah, unfortunately you can find them scattered around in Ukraine in different places. That's basically Kyiv. Judging from the buildings on the background, I think that looks like either I know where it is. It's Holosivsky district. I'm like 90% sure that it's a Holosivsky district. And we have another... wait, let me check out the chat real quick, because I always forget doing that. Just a second. Beep Russian logistics. Basically, I think if we can collect enough Russian drones that were literally downed and not being damaged much, actually, I think we can refurbish them and send them back. That would be a proper thing. Extalis Vanimus, what is the status of the nuclear facilities? That's a very good question, because first of all, on the Chernobyl power plant, the electricity has been restored, which is good. I think it was restored already yesterday after our stream. And the guys report basically all the time, every day, about the situation at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They said that there were no radiation leak, thank God. As for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, we have information that actually orcs used this used that gap when there was a blackout to reconnect the Ukrainian Zaporizhia nuclear power plant to the Russian electric grid. So we have this information. And also I had some important update regarding Belgium, I think. Maybe not. Let me check the chat real quick. Hello Beep, hello Felipe, Jam Roast, Brigitte, who else? Mr. Michael Patterson, just another guy, hello. Martin, hello my dear friend, and Paul, always happy to see you here. Brigitte, Belgium and the Netherlands, my closest neighbors. Same here, actually. So, speaking of Belgium, we have information that for the first time approximately 15 drones were recorded over the Belgian military base. They were spotted around a town of Duren. So the drones flew across the territory of Belgium through the border to Germany, and they were spotted around the town of Duren. Duren, that's actually pretty close. The drones initially were spotted around 1:45 a.m. Local time, over the military training camp at Elseborn, the NATO base in Liège. You can basically see that Liege, I'm sorry, oh my god, Liège, that's in Ukrainian. That Liege is basically on border with Ukraine, with Germany. So that's actually another case of Russian drones being spotted. Yeah, I remember what I wanted to talk about. We will talk about it a bit later because there's several interesting videos that I would really like you to see as well. So according to the rest of the reports, Airbnb is hosting Russian drone teams. Look, that was literally almost my thoughts. All right, when I read reports like that's almost my impression. Felipe says, I did my Belgian military service in Duren. That's crazy. Cordy, hello everybody from Essen, Germany. Oh my god, hello. Moin. Newman is literally harassing everybody to hit like, which is a proper thing to do actually. And also Croupier says, my wife, 2 weeks old, when Chernobyl melted down, her and family moved from Kiev to Mariupol when it happened. Nama was born in Mariupol. I was like 6, like 5, not yet 6. I was like 5 years old when... No, wait, I was born in 1985 and I was like less than a year old actually, myself. Yeah. I remember I was in Kryvyi Rih with my brother, with my mother, and my father was actually sent to Chernobyl power plant to liquidate the consequence of the catastrophe. Michael, oh my god, Michael from Australian Vet. Good day, buddy. Hello, my friends. Thank you for your service. And Eddie, thank you so much for your support as well. Bryce, hello from Ontario, Canada. Canada, you are really cool and legendary. I think their threats to nuclear power stations are their biggest mistake yet. Yes, we will talk about this in just a while because I have several interesting ideas, and also Matt says wouldn't be Airbnb. I think it's also like a possibility, but I don't really think that Russians literally send thousands of their spies to European countries. I think they literally hire people through like social media, through messengers. They literally hire people. Okay, that was one of my ideas after watching some of the videos from yesterday's Valdai conference with Putin, also known as Huilo. So the shutdown of the government in the United States put the Ukrainian negotiations regarding the possible agreement between Ukraine and US regarding the drones under the threat of not happening, basically. So according to the Telegraph, as you probably know, there is currently a meeting in Washington taking place in the United States between Ukrainian representatives and representatives of the United States Army, and they were talking about the possible agreement for cooperation between Ukraine and United States in terms of building drones, sharing Ukraine's experience and technologies with the American army. And because there is currently a shutdown, there is a risk that this agreement will not be signed, actually. Remember, I think it was either earlier this year or like later last year, there was this Russian tanker Eagle S that was captured in Finland waters because they ripped a bunch of cables on the bottom of the sea. So there was a court, all right, and according to the decision of the court, they cannot prosecute the captain of this Russian tanker as well as two of his assistants because they are a different jurisdiction. So according to the Convention of the United Nations regarding the naval law, the right to investigate any crime that took place in the waters belongs to the country belongs to the country which flag is on the vessel, basically. So if it's a Russian tanker using like a flag of Bangladesh, then it means that this vessel cannot be prosecuted, for example, in the United States or in the Finland, which is crazy. So it's either like what's your flag, right, or what is the origin of your vessel. That is why basically the Russian ship that literally ruptured a bunch of communication cables, and we remember that there were several cases like that happening in the Baltic Sea, they will not be prosecuted for that. Which most probably means that karma will find them in a different way. What else do we have here? We have another report coming from RTRS. Let me check out this one. I really want to know what kind of story. I got Reuters. Jesus Christ. Oh, Saint Mary. So, according to Reuters, the delivery of the Tomahawk missiles from United States to Ukraine are not really plausible, okay, and according to their sources, the United States are trying to investigate other possible sources or other possible options in terms of missiles with smaller radius, smaller range to be delivered to Ukraine. The question is, of course, why? One of the reasons is probably because the Tomahawk missiles are generally speaking launched from the naval platforms. I kind of think that there must be some sort of platforms to launch Tomahawks. I am not really sure from the ground, all right, from the land-based platforms. I don't know. I cannot tell you. But yeah, and also Beep there in the chat confirms. So Tomahawks are sea-based launched, so it's unlikely. On the other hand, how much unlikely is that? I mean, we're talking about Ukraine where everything is possible. Where like you can launch drones that fly 2,000 kilometers and strike Russian targets or sink Russian ships. So the platform is, of course, is the question, but like at the same time, like Ukrainian airplanes are now flying, and like Ukrainian Soviet-based airplanes are now flying with American missiles attached to their wings, and like it's just fine, all right? So it works okay. This commentary down there, I rather agree with, because I don't really see Trump supplying Ukraine with Tomahawks, not this year at least, all right? At least not this year. Of course, we all noticed a bit of shift in his rhetorics. We noticed a bit of a shift in Putin's rhetorics. I don't know if they couldn't share like a hamburger in Alaska. I have no idea what was the reason for like the, the end of their beautiful friendship. But again, like judging from what Trump was doing all this time, which is his basically trend of what he's doing, his agenda, or call it, I don't know how to call it. He wasn't helping Ukraine much. And one of the signals of shift in this agenda would be, for example, actual delivery of those tomahawks to Ukraine. So it's not what they say about tomahawks, it's whether the missiles made in the United States come to Ukraine or not. Factually, that's the thing, you see. So let's check out other updates. But another thing that I noticed was that Putin was actually very much worried with this idea of tomahawks possibly coming to Ukraine, and he talked about it yesterday as well. We will check it out. We have a report coming from the Air Force of Ukraine. 416 Russian drones as well as missiles were launched overnight. They used cruise missiles Iskander, aviation missiles X-59, 69, and also different types of drones, generally Shaheds, Gerbera, and stuff like that. 320 aerial targets out of 416 were intercepted. So, unfortunately, we have just a bit less than 100 impacts. According to the report, there were 18 impacts and 18 impacts of Russian missiles and 78 impacts of Russian strike drones on 15 locations, including, by the way, that pig farm that the Russians hit. And also the debris were seen falling at 6 different locations. We have a footage coming from the Air Force. There is this absolutely amazing video with apparently copyrighted music of Ukrainian pilot shooting down Russian drones in the Ukrainian skies. It's a pilot of MiG-29, call sign masked, and the video is really, really dark, but we can see some of the amazing fireworks when Russian drones are being intercepted. Bakhmut Demon, one of the guys that I'm following myself, I know him through third people, all right? So he reports that in Pokrovsk, the Russian terrorists cannot achieve anything, and they are being turned into fertilizer for Ukrainian tomatoes big time. And also, we have some crazy report coming from Los Angeles, where an explosion and fire was recorded at an oil refinery, and the reasons for this incident to happen remain unknown. I have no idea why it happened, but because I'm kind of suspicious, I don't really believe that it was just a coincidence or a disaster. Too many things combined, you know? Too many things combined. The real Vladimir Putin, it's really, really nice to see you there in the chat. Thank you for joining us. It's been a while. What else do we have? Greetings from Berlin, the dude. Oh my god, this is the best nickname I have ever seen. I'm serious. Speaking of this fire at the American refinery, like, yeah, of course, there could be an accident or some, I don't know, unfortunate mishap, but I don't want to sound like a bad prophet, right? How do we say prophet? But I think there is a possibility that we will see more of that, unfortunately. So yes, there's another report coming from Novovodolazhsk community in Kharkiv Oblast, where the chief of this community, Alexander Yesin, says that there were more than 20 strikes on the pig farm. Here you can see it. The results of this attack on basically on Ukrainian food. And switching to a bit inspiring news, my dear friends, we have several reports, again, coming from the Terrorussia. There you can see Russian Orenburg, right? And those are basically Ukrainian drones paying visits to the Russian oil refinery. So this is, by the way, very, very interesting because the dude on the background, if you listen to him, let me like increase the sound just a bit, all right?
Вон он, пидорас, летит, сука, беспилотный, нахуй. Пиздец.
So basically he said like this long Russian sentence in their stupid language that he could replace with just 4 words. There it is flying, all right? That's basically what he said, because the rest of the speech, which was absolutely typical for the Russians, you know, people born in that freaking wasteland. The rest was obviously like curses and foul language. Like all that language could be replaced with just 4 words. Like, there is the UAV flying. That's it. But like, why? I don't know. If, you know, if I was a father of the Russian kid, I would make him fucking wash his mouth with soap every fucking day after that shit. So we have several videos of those strikes actually happening at the Orenburg oil refinery, and what makes this refinery special is that it processes approximately 6 million tons of the Terrorussia fuel per year. No more, all right? Not anymore. So here we have another footage of this beautiful strike. The Russians on the background basically saying, "Oh my God, we are so happy that Ukrainian drones are finally here. We are happy that we can be part of this Russian special military operation. Finally, Ukrainian drones are hitting our oil refineries 1,400 kilometers away from Ukrainian border, because we could never imagine that this was actually possible, but there it is. There it is on your screens, my dear friends." That's like a small translation from what they're saying. Like, okay, not what they're saying, but they're thinking, all right? Yeah, Russians are extremely happy to see those drones nowadays because, you know, when you live in Russia, when you strike Ukraine with your long-range weaponry for so many years, basically it becomes very, very boring. It becomes very boring eventually because You don't really feel the war. You want to feel like this conqueror, like Russian invader and stuff. You don't really feel, well, you see like some fucking black bags coming from Ukraine on the train station, like that kind of shit. You can see some, I don't know, prices growing time to time, people fighting in the Russian supermarkets over like sugar, over eggs, things like that. Your neighbor's father, for example, all of a sudden proclaimed dead or like deceased in Ukraine. But generally, not much happens. All right. And then you finally have this opportunity to like literally see Ukrainian drones coming and striking your oil refineries and other factories and different facilities. This brings the peace this brings peace and satisfaction to Russian people. I think that the real Vladimir Putin there in the chat can actually confirm this, right? Like they have like the new taste for life now, because they can literally observe the results of their very, very own invasion of Ukraine and what it results into. This one is funny. Why they don't evacuate them from there? Because what's your country, dude? Oh, he's falling, she says. She's like, oh, it must have been intercepted, and then there goes like this cloud of smoke. Of course, it was intercepted. It was intercepted with an oil refinery. So we have another interesting update coming from Terrorussia, where the terrorist group known as Española officially announced that it will be removed, retired probably, resigned. In 2022, when the Russian terrorists invaded Ukraine massively, of course, because they didn't have much troops to occupy whole Ukraine, as you probably remember, and generally they didn't have enough resources and anything else, because the Russian mobilization was first announced already back in 2022. In the late 2022. So in 2022, the Terrorrussians, looking at their enormous losses in Ukraine and at their inability to capture any significant territory as of 2025, they still don't have any control over any major city in Ukraine since 2022. So they decided to create a brigade, a brigade of Russian volunteers known as Española. So Española was based on Russian football hooligans, Russian fascists, Russian neo-Nazis, like that Melchakov, but maybe just a bit more, I don't know, covered, all right? So basically it was full of worst scum you can literally find on planet Earth. And for some reasons I cannot explain, yesterday it was announced that Española, that this Terrorrussian brigade, ceased to exist. I have no idea why. I don't know. The real Vladimir Putin says, even though Ukraine has only destroyed 20% or so of Russia's oil infrastructure, it looks like they have hit the most important ones. Generally we have hit, I don't know how much we destroyed, but how much we hit is much more than 20% of Russian oil refineries. The biggest were hit, of course, including the one in Bashkortostan, including one in Rostov. in Ryazan. So those were hit really good. But speaking of Española, that's actually interesting update. I don't know, maybe like Russian football hooligans finished? I don't know. According to Financial Times, the United Kingdom is already helping Ukraine to conduct long-range strikes against Russia. According to the Financial Times, Ukraine is expanding its cooperation with NATO in frames of intel and long-range strikes. Yes, we already have information that United Kingdom is involved in those operations against Terrorussia, being asked by Washington, and also the United States are getting ready to provide Ukraine with new intelligence data to keep striking Terrorussia, Russians' energy infrastructure using drones and long-range missiles. This will become an increase of the role of the Washington in the war, as it is reported in the news. That's encouraging. And regarding the situation with our nuclear facilities, as I just mentioned, according to the Ministry of External Affairs of Ukraine, Russia has committed the blackout at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on purpose in order to connect Ukrainian nuclear power station to the Russian energy system. And the Russian next step that we expect is will be launching the reactor, which most probably will happen without proper cooling, without proper licenses, without proper observation procedures and things like that. Because as we know, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is captured, is occupied by the Russian terrorists. The staff, the personnel of this power plant is generally brought from the terrorist federation itself. We have another update from Der Spiegel that reports that the München airport was closed, was shut down temporarily because of the drone hazard. 17 flights were cancelled, which caused a delay for almost 3,000 passengers in the München airport. Also, 15 airplanes that had to arrive, they were diverted to Stuttgart, to Nuremberg, Vienna, and Frankfurt. So, as we can see, these drone sightings, they become more and more frequent all over Europe. I literally think that Russia is hiring people. That Russia, it's not like Russia massively brings Russian spies and stuff like that. They literally hire people. The drones themselves, they might be of a military origin. I think that some of them are. They might be literally custom made, they might be commercially made, but I think Russian terrorists are hiring people through social media and different messengers. Please tell me your thoughts about this one, because they do it all the time. They do it even in Ukraine. They hire, for example, like Ukrainian teenagers as suicide bombers. They hire people online for like very, very small money, and they use them to commit more and more terrorist attacks and crimes in Ukraine, outside Ukraine, and around the world. I think probably they do it here as well. Drones are very, very easy to find nowadays, and basically you can use, like, for this purpose you can literally use, like, I don't know, toy drones with short range, but they can be specifically used in order to cause a disruption, for example, over airfields and things like that. As far as I remember, like the toy drones don't even have the proper software that stops them from accessing banned areas like airspaces, spaces around airfields and things like that. You can say many things about them, but FSB is not incompetent. Well, there is a reason why people, why individuals in Terrorussia pass selection to FSB. Is because they don't want complete degenerates. Complete degenerates that don't pass selection to FSB usually go to GRU-GSH, Russian main intelligence department. Remember those two imbeciles that were recorded in Salisbury when they attempted to use chemical weapons and kill Skripal family and several other people? So imbeciles usually go there. And the reason they were captured on all the cameras is basically because they are imbeciles, because those were like two best Russian agents sent to the United Kingdom. You can be sure about that one. But as for FSB, they are cunning, of course. They are cunning. They are smart enough to do all sorts of terrorist attacks and sabotage around Europe, involving basically local citizens. And they're doing that. They assassinate people, they conduct sabotage, fires, explosions in different industrial sites, ammo storages, European ammo storages like in Czechia. Yeah, they are cunning enough. And also corrupt like crazy. Because, for example, they are given budget. They're given enough budget to pay like $500 to hired people, for example, in Germany to launch those drones over München, right? But they only pay them 200. you know. Okay, let's check out the rest of the updates. So, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation in Ukraine, 161 Ukrainian child is being prosecuted in the occupied Donbass for so-called extremism. So there was another crazy update that Ukrainian children on the occupied territories are studying online using Ukrainian services and Ukrainian schools, and actually Russians are threatening to basically give their parents all sorts of trouble on the occupied territory if they don't switch to Russian education. It was recorded in Kherson. Cases were in like Mariupol region, in Donetsk, Luhansk, etc. So according to the Center for the Countering Disinformation, Ukrainian students and teenagers are being punished for all sorts of national identity, from publications in the social media to using Ukrainian symbolics or even listening songs. These actions are considered by Russians as extremism and destructional behavior. There were cases of fines, there were cases of public apologies and different pressure against their families. And the most disturbing fact is that there are cases of forceful transfer of those children to the mental institution. So only on the temporarily occupied territories of Donbass, there were 161 criminal cases that were opened against Ukrainian kids, and 48 of those children were delivered forcibly to the mental institutions, to the Russian mental institutions, which is completely crazy, but because we're talking about Russians, that's absolutely not unexpected, all right? Because, guys, even though, like, here I'm trying to explain a lot about Russian terrorists, their culture, you probably think I'm very, very biased about them and stuff like that, but you don't have complete picture of what the Terrorist Federation is. When we speak about, for example, prosecution of human rights and repressions against people in China, where they use AI to track those people, where they use different villages that people cannot leave, in China, and things like that, so their rights, their freedoms are limited, is basically Russia is basically a copy of that. Less technological, more brutal, but basically same kind of shit. Guys, we are living in absolutely crazy times where countries like that actually exist, As one of our friends there said, there are countries with criminals, and Russia is a bunch of criminals who have a country, actually. It's 100% true, but we all just cannot understand the whole scale of this shit. The whole scale of absolutely ugly and inhumane processes that happen in the Terrorist Federation on a daily basis. My God. Hopefully today, this evening, I will have a stream with Kristaps from Latvia. He's a really, really good journalist who actually writes PhD on the Russian so-called criminal culture, Russian понятия, русский мир, all that shit. And we will talk about that. Please remind me to show you that that episode where Putin, when he was invited to a Russian school, where he actually drew like a female organ on the whiteboard for kids, for kids to see, because he thought it was funny. All right, please remind me about this one, because it's actually, I cannot call it funny, all right, because I would never like some fucking asshole to come to a class to my kid and draw a vagina on the whiteboard. But please remind me to show you that one, because you just need to know about that. People need to talk about those things. Putin did that because he thought it would be funny. He thought that kids actually, those, I don't know which class was there, they would recognize it most probably. I don't know, kids that have no idea how it even looks like. Please remind me of that, because I really want to talk about it. Russia is an ugly place. Russian culture is an ugly phenomenon, all right? I cannot call it a culture. It's an ugly artificial phenomenon that is freaking horrifying and absolutely dangerous at the same time, all right? People around the world should know more about this shit, I think. When, when there are like Russian comics, Russian comedians with their stand-ups, and, they like dance with beer, they portray themselves as gopniks, wearing ushankas and stuff like that, they think it's funny. Yeah, I don't think it's funny, because they don't show reality. Reality is basically Russian invaders going to small Ukrainian towns, killing Ukrainian civilians with their hands tied behind their backs in the basements, doing all sorts of sexual abuse and sexual crimes, including underage people. and stealing toilets and refrigerators. That is real Russia, and that is unfortunately not funny. So like, if you want to be a comedian in Russia, unfortunately it's impossible, because if you start showing the reality in that ugly wasteland, it's absolutely fucking disturbing. All right, there will be absolutely nothing funny about that, about like Russian invaders, for example, going to a tiny town, killing people and trying to burn them in gathering their bodies in a pile, like it happened in Bucha, in Irpin, and trying to set them on fire to hide their crimes, or burying those people massively in the mass graves, like in Bucha. That is a reality, that is like real Russians, and that is unfortunately not funny. So it's very, very hard to be like a funny Russian comedian, especially portraying Russian gopniks that are not real, because that is like real Russian gopniks and what they do. Okay, guys, it was like an emotional intro, but we have a bunch of other updates, and unfortunately I have to wrap this episode up very, very soon, because I also need to finish another video for the UA TV. And speaking of UA TV, I prepared several videos regarding the regarding survival of the Russian strikes, regarding survival of the Russian airstrikes, Russian drone attacks. Please check them out, because this is just a basic information that everybody should at least be acquainted with, right? Especially if you live in places like Germany, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland. You gotta be acquainted with that. So Yuri Butusa reports that in the 19th Motorized Division of the Terrorist Federation, the losses were so big, so the cars were not able to deliver the bodies of their soldiers. And that is the reason why on the front lines they started to build the field morgues. All right, and here we have actually a picture of some random garage that is used as a field morgue. Is it even a garage? It's like, it looks like some shed. All right, there's an air conditioner or something like that, but they say that it's basically a field morgue that is built by Russians themselves in the rear, where it is not like supposed to even exist, because they lack morgues in the frontline hospitals as well. But those who have experience of evacuating people, they know that it's not always possible to basically bring the bodies to the morgue, to the frontline morgue, and bring them further. And there are different reasons for that. First of all is, of course, Ukrainian UAVs. Because of that, evacuating Russian bodies becomes more and more complicated task. But another thing is that every hour that the Russian body is spending without proper conditions, like temperature and things like that, it means that it will be decomposing, and it causes a lot of other consequences. It's very interesting to know, actually. But it looks like a new trend that Russians will be using more and more field morgues, because basically they don't really want, they don't really have opportunity to evacuate a lot of their wounded on the first place, let alone their dead ones. New trend emerging in Russia, actually. That's That's kind of interesting. We already saw trends like donkeys, like horses used to deliver stuff to the front lines, and now we can see field morgues because basically it's easier to build a big shed and pile the bodies of your Russian comrades in that shed, then literally risk your vehicles and deliver those bodies to the rear. This one is something very, very disturbing. Let's check out this video.
Сложность в том, что это, как вы поняли, находится в зоне досягаемости артиллерии.
So basically he says we cannot fix the power grid around, he's talking about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We cannot fix the grid around the Zaporizhzhia power plant because it's within the reach of Ukraine's artillery. What the fuck are you doing on the Ukrainian territory generally, guys? Fuck off, go home, we have no vodka.
Украинской. И они бьют по этим местам и практически не дают подойти туда нашим ремонтным бригадам. При этом
So yeah, he's basically accusing Ukraine on strikes on Ukrainian facilities, basically as Russians always do, because what do people generally do in places like Aleppo, in places like Ukraine, in places like, I don't know, Georgia or Chechnya, when Russian soldiers attack? All of a sudden, my dear friends, all of a sudden people in those territories, some kind of self-destruction mechanism activates inside of those people, and they start massively attack their own houses, their own facilities, kill their own people, their own civilians, because Russians never do that. When Russians came to Germany in 1945, not a single German woman has been raped by the Russian army. Apparently they did it themselves, right? So that is just some very, very strange thing about people that are usually being attacked or occupied by Russians. Those people for some reason become crazy and they start massively strike their own facilities, their own hospitals, because everything is possible when you lie.
этом все то же самое рассказывают, что мы это делаем. Но вот господин Гросси был, там же присутствуют сотрудники МАГАТЭ.
Yeah, he mentions the representatives of the IAEA, EAIA, the people who observe the situation. However, it's not really the case because they are limited in their functions there, and most often they just don't let them do their job. I'm talking about the Russian occupiers and the representatives of the IAEA. And he says that Grossi was there at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He saw that Ukrainians attacked their own Zaporizhzhian power plant, but he didn't say a thing. Okay? My God, like, for real, dude.
Они помалкивают, стесняясь на самом деле происходящих процессов, но все видят.
Yeah, he says basically Grossi can see everything, that Ukrainians are striking Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, but they don't say anything. They are too shy to say the truth. It's so cool. Like, one of the funny tricks when Russian imbecile is trying to impersonate somebody, speak on their behalf. Like Grossi sees that. Grossi didn't see that stuff. He saw a bunch of drunk Russian fucks literally pissing and shitting on the walls of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. That's what he saw. Or, for example, Russian imbeciles. Remember when they started a fire in one of the cooling towers? They literally dropped a bunch of tires in the cooling tower of the nuclear power plant, set them on fire. There was like this huge smoke coming out of there, and they said like it was a Ukrainian attack. Like, nothing can even burn inside of that tower because there's nothing inside, right? And that's what Grossi saw. 100%. He saw a bunch of like graffitis with foul language, with like dicks drawn on the walls of the Russian, by the Russians on the wall of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. That's what he saw. Snatched toilets in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant or not working bathrooms, that's what he saw. That's the reality, what Grossi could have seen on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. But like literally talking on behalf of Grossi, that is something only Russian imbeciles can do, all right?
Они же все видят, что происходит. Что же мы сами по себе наносим удары, что ли? Это же понятно, что это чушь. Это опасная игра.
He says, we cannot strike ourselves. Oh, really? Weren't you the dude who literally killed a bunch of your very own citizens in trying to start the Second Chechen War? Weren't you the dude who literally blew up a bunch of Russian houses? Like, don't tell us that Russians don't strike themselves, all right? Because nobody in the world believes this shit anymore.
И на той стороне люди тоже должны понимать, если они будут с этим играть вот так опасно, у них есть еще работающие электростанции.
So basically here what he says is he openly threatens Ukraine. He says, if you keep striking our people at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, you should understand that on that side, on the Ukrainian side, they still have working nuclear power plants that Russians can hit.
На их атомные электростанции на их стороне. И что нам мешает отвечать зеркально?
And nothing stops us from striking them the same way. So basically he's threatening of striking Ukrainian nuclear power plants absolutely openly, absolutely calmly. You see like his fucking face over there on the video. He is like, you know, like trying to make like very angry and scary face and scare the shit out of people supporting Ukraine, you know, so people would think, oh, maybe we should not support Ukraine because those crazy Russian fucks will strike plenty of nuclear power plants and like literally destroy the world, right? Like, and he openly threatens to do that. There are already cases of Russians doing that. For example, everybody saw that footage of Russian drone striking the Chernobyl power plant, right? Everybody saw that. It wasn't like flying over the sarcophagus. It was flying into the sarcophagus. It was aimed at Ukrainian Chernobyl power plant, which again, like didn't even work, all right? The only purpose was to literally provoke a radiation leak, all right? And scare the hell out of people. Yes, so they already did that. And can Putin do that? Most probably he can. He doesn't even care that most of the radiation will go to Russia itself after that. But yes, he can. And you will see a lot of, for example, paid talking heads in the social media saying that, well, yes, they are so crazy. That's why we should negotiate. That's why Ukrainians should think about it. Because what if Putin strikes nuclear power plants in Ukraine? What will happen? Let's not let it happen. All right. Those are basically the same fucks who justify Al-Qaeda, for example, who justify 9/11. Like the same kind of shit. Those people are like Dave Smith, for example. His rhetorics are completely the same. Trust me. Isn't Chernobyl power plant offline? Jason, yes, it is, but not completely. So it doesn't generate electricity. It's basically dismantled. Everything is disassembled except for the administrative facility and that fourth reactor that exploded and melted. And there are two constructions built over the sarcophagus. There's the main sarcophagus hiding the reactor that was built in 1986 and 1987. And then there's this this big round stuff that was built further from the reactor and then like brought and installed over it. So inside of that second sarcophagus, there is a lot of different equipment used to measure levels of the radiation and all that stuff. So there's a lot of sensors installed there to monitor the processes taking place inside of the fourth reactor right now. They have to monitor it constantly, trying to see whether there are like fluctuations, whether there's a shift in the radioactive background and things like that. And because of the blackouts, because the remains of the power plant, they are attached to the power grid to make those things function. So basically, yeah, my friend, now you have this information. Basically, those sensors are important to monitor the situation inside of the fourth reactor, and if there are blackouts, then basically we have no information coming from that place. And also there are fire extinguishing there is fire extinguishing equipment also installed in that second sarcophagus, and when there's no electricity, they just don't work. So if anything happens there during the blackout, like that, that stuff cannot be used effectively. Let's check out another one. That's where he was asked by the host why he sends so many drones into Denmark. Why do you send so many drones into the Denmark, the host says. I won't do it anymore, he says. I won't do it. Not gonna send drones to France, to Denmark.
Не в Копенгаген, куда еще долетают? На это самое, да, везде долетают. Да, в Лиссабон.
Lisbon. He accidentally like revealed that he knows the places where those drones were, and then he was like, Lisbon, you know, just in case.
Куда они летают? Знаете, там развлекаются люди, которые когда-то развлекались по поводу...
He says the people who back in the times when there were UFO sightings, the people had fun. So the same people are having fun today in those countries.
По поводу неопознанных летающих объектов, НЛО. Но там столько чудаков, как и у нас, кстати.
He says there are so many nutters in those countries.
Ничем не отличается, особенно молодые люди. Там они сейчас будут запускать вам каждый день.
He says those young people that are there in those countries, they will be launching those UAVs every single day. Guys, basically, if like you had any doubts about Russians launching those drones, now I bet that you have zero, because I believe that what this Huilo says there on the screen, that is basically the truth. That is basically the case. Young local people in Germany, in France, in Denmark, they will be launching those drones. It will happen exactly the way he says, because basically now he doesn't even have to hide it. All the people that are being hired by the Russian FSB, they will be launching those drones. Russia will be spending a lot of resources actually on hiring those people, on recruiting them in the messengers, and providing them with drones and letting them launch them over European airports. So I think that's exactly the case. Now you know, basically. Basically, now you know.
Смотрите, что у нас вон и по каналам телевидения показывают, как идут наши войска. Да, это требует времени.
He says, look what they show, what Ukrainians are showing. Actually, I think I should start with the first video, because it's very informative.
Это мощное оружие, оно, правда, уже такое не совсем современное.
Here he is very concerned, actually, you can tell from his face. He talks about the tomahawks. He says, yes, tomahawks is a powerful weapon, it's not really modern though.
Оно мощное и представляющее угрозу.
And of course, it's powerful and it poses a threat.
И, конечно, это не изменит, вообще никак не изменит отношения.
And of course, it will not change anything in terms of this disposition. Oh my God, how to call it? Relation between Russia's army and Russia's stance in Ukraine, and Ukrainians' army and Ukrainian stance in Ukraine.
Соотношение на поле боя, я уже говорил, фундаментальные проблемы вооруженных сил.
He says, I already talked about that, the fundamental problems of Ukrainian army, they didn't disappear. At the same time, I don't really see fundamental problems in the Russian army disappearing.
Украины, сколько их там не насыщает дронами, сколько не создавай, на первый взгляд, непреодолимые линии обороны с помощью дронов.
He says, no matter what you do, no matter how many drones you have there, no matter how many defense lines you're building there and protect them with drones, nothing will help against the mighty Russian army.
Все равно, если личного состава не будет, воевать-то некому.
It doesn't matter because if you don't have soldiers, nobody will be fighting. And he says that as if there are absolutely no soldiers on the Ukrainian front line. My dear friends, in 2022, for example, Douglas McGregor, extremely respected, all right, extremely respected American veteran, American expert, fucking colonel. Already in 2022, he said that basically in 2 weeks, the Ukrainian army will collapse. I was like listening to him while Kyiv was under siege, and I was like, for real, dude? And he was saying the same when Ukrainian army was finishing the operational encirclement of the remains of the Russian battalion tactical groups in Kyiv Oblast before they withdrew from Kyiv Oblast, later from Chernihiv Oblast, later from Kharkiv Oblast, Poltava, Sumy. And Douglas McGregor was saying the same. He was like, couple more weeks, you will see Ukrainian army falling, and basically, boom, Russia is like withdrawing the remains of their fucking conscripts, of their Spetsnaz, all of their elite troops. And Douglas McGregor, with his like serious face, was like saying, well, yeah, Russian army is so mighty, Ukrainians, they don't have soldiers anymore. And he was saying that Ukrainians don't have soldiers in 2023 and then in 2024, and then the Kursk started, he kept saying that Ukrainians don't have soldiers to protect Ukraine, and then 2025 we can still hear shit like that. Basically, if you listen to Putin, you will have this impression that Russian army is steadily advances, all right, every single day, capturing like trillions of square kilometers. Ukrainians don't even fight because even though they have drones, they don't have people to defend their land. But the reality is, it's October 2025, Russia didn't capture even a single major city in Ukraine and keeps struggling here for almost 4 fucking years. They didn't capture Mykolaiv, they didn't capture Zaporizhia, they didn't capture Kharkiv, they didn't capture any major city in Ukraine. Yeah, like Bakhmut, the town that is like 6 kilometers wide, right? Like 3 miles wide. Yeah, Bakhmut, that was like an insane, achievement. We're talking about major cities. It's, for example, you go to Pennsylvania, right? You have Pennsylvania invaded. Let's say you have like United States invaded, right? Like, for example, Pennsylvania, where is it? Pennsylvania, and you have like the major city of Philadelphia. I know because I had like an acquainted lady there. So you have Philadelphia, which is your major city, and eventually the troops moving through, like, I don't know, they take control over Gettysburg. They say, like, after Gettysburg, we, like, the road to Washington, D.C. is open after we take Gettysburg, all right? And then, for example, they sacrificed 35,000 Russians to take the incredibly large town of York, fucking megapolis, all right? York, which is like, I don't know how much is that, like 2 miles across, right? The city is as large as 2 miles across. And they present this in their media as fucking victory over the international Nazism and fascism and the communism and Martians. And after York, there's only like Washington and Berlin. And their army is like staying there for like years, all right? While Philadelphia is still there and like nothing happens. And people in Philadelphia, yeah, they're being hit by drones and missiles, but they hold firm. And basically that's a situation in Ukraine. If you take a look at the front line, it didn't change like much compared to the rest of the Ukrainian territory that is still much bigger than 500,000 square kilometers of land. Nothing changed much. Russians are barely capturing several kilometers of territory a day. The length of the front line in Ukraine is whooping 1,500 kilometers, just so you could understand. And Putin is presenting this as if Russian army is winning dramatically. In Ukraine, Ukrainians don't have soldiers. Hard to understand who defends the front lines all these years from the Russian terrorists. Apparently, I don't know, like Polish mercenaries, Martians, Zog reptilians who landed in Ukraine. I don't know, like Terminators. I have no idea, you tell me. But Russians present this as incredibly successful Russian operation in Ukraine. Only yesterday we talked about 9,000 obituaries only published in September, right? That's just the situation. The dude talks about Ukraine losing the war. Like, yes, it takes time, but we are advancing and shit. They are basically grinding like the remains of their healthy Russian male population without achieving any significant results. That's like in military terms. And whatever imbeciles like Douglas MacGregor are explaining to you about the real situation in Ukraine, where he's never even been in his fucking useless life, doesn't change reality, all right? Because there is reality on the ground, and then there is fucking Narnia that exists in Putin's head and Douglas MacGregor's head. So that's just so you could understand.
Смотрите, что у нас он и по каналам телевидения показывает, как идут наши войска. Да.
He says, look at what is shown on the TV channels. Our troops are shown, you know, steadily moving forward. I don't know, though, why they never show like those troops bringing donkeys to the front lines, because they don't have enough armored vehicles to support those troops. That is something I don't really understand. They never show donkeys. They never show like horses. You always have to go into like the depth of the filthy Russian Telegram channels to find that content from the ground, because you know, some extremely funny Russian soldiers, they sometimes post that online, and Russian censorship cannot, you know, delete that in time. So yeah, you can see that footage coming from the Russian terrorists themselves. But why doesn't Putin mention like donkeys, golf carts, guys? Like, the mighty Russian Empire that was building Viking spaceships and nuclear missiles now has to buy Chinese golf carts because majority of their armored vehicles were burned in Ukraine. That is something they don't really show on the Russian TV. Most obviously, they will only show how the Russian army steadily advances forward.
Да, это требует времени. По 2, по 3 человека. Но продвигаются.
Yeah, he says...
Работает.
Our army is moving. Yes, 2-3 men, they're moving forward. They're moving forward. 2-3 men, 2-3 men. Before that, of course, like 300 men died on this battlefield because they were sending those 2-3 men for 3 months straight, and Ukrainians build enough drones to eliminate all of them. A lot of them are either being shot by their own Russian comrades because they don't want to drag, the wounded body back to their positions. And basically, why he doesn't talk about that? Why he never mentions the reality, right? He basically says that, yeah, our meat assaults is like, yeah, this is a proper thing to do. This is how Russian army is fighting.
Подавляют, продвигаются. И здесь то же самое будет. Ну вот...
Actually, it's funny thing that he talks about all this while mentioning the tomahawks. He's actually saying like it doesn't matter like what kind of weaponry Ukraine is receiving because also Paul is mentioning something very, very important because Korolev, that the designer of the Russian spaceships, he comes from Zhytomyr, Ukraine. And in Zhytomyr, Ukraine, there's actually a big museum of air and space technologies named after Ukrainian designer and engineer Mr. Korolev, who, by the way, in the 30s was captured and brought to the Russian prison. And they broke his jaw during an interrogation, which was the reason he later died because of his jaw. It didn't heal properly, and it caused some complications when he was sick later in his life. But yeah, you can Google the pictures of Korolev in the Russian prison. Like the mugshot, it's there. So basically, Ukrainian person launched Russian Gagarin into space for the first time, designed all the Russian spacecraft. So yeah, I absolutely agree on that. But speaking of Huilo talking there in the Telegram, he basically says there is absolutely no reason Ukrainians will have any advantage if they have tomahawks, because on the front line nothing will change, and we will keep sending soldiers after soldiers, wave after wave, 2-3 men, until they capture like a position, and then we will send 2-3 more men. He's so funny explaining like the brutality of the Russian meat waves, but it's good that at least he's not lying that there are like thousands of Russian tanks attacking Berlin, all right? Because in 2022 they already showed an infographics of Russian troops fighting in the outskirts of Lviv. I remember that. It's on my videos.
Были же атакамс. И что? Ну, да, нанесли
He says, so they had ATACMS, so what?
определенный ущерб. В конце концов, системы ПВО России приспособились.
He says, yes, they caused some damage, but in the end, Russian air defenses actually improved, and we will also adapt to the tomahawks as well. So while he says that, any psychologist will tell you that, because he explains all that. This is the best sign that he literally cares about tomahawks. He's trying to tell you a lot of bullshit to make you believe that he doesn't afraid of tomahawks, because in reality he does. all right? He is scared of tomahawks. And that is why he basically talks for like a whole minute about those missiles, because he is afraid of that, because he wants to tell his population that tomahawks just like don't care about them, and also because he wants to send a signal to the United States. Let's check this out.
Несмотря на то, что они гиперзвуковые, начали их сбивать. Могут томагавки нанести нам ущерб? Могут. Мы будем их сбивать.
So, can tomahawks cause us damage? Yes, they can, and we will be like shooting them down my ass.
Будем
Yeah.
совершенствовать свою систему
course.
ПВО.
We will be improving our air defenses. What he means in reality is that he will bring more air defenses to protect a bunch of his palaces located all over the Russian Empire. Like, I guarantee.
Ущерб нашим отношениям, в которых наметился какой-то свет в тоннель.
And he says they will also cause damage to Russia-American relations, that we can finally see some kind of light in the end of the tunnel. And Putin, I beg you, like as a Ukrainian, you know, on behalf of decent people of the world, if you see light in the end of the tunnel, please, dude, go there, all right? Fucking run towards this light. Run towards the light as fast as you can, all right? Please do. So he says, like, the tomahawks that are given to Ukraine will, of course, destroy relations between the United States and the terrorist federation.
В конце туннеля. Конечно, нанесет. Ну а как же? Применять томагавки без прямого участия американских военнослужащих невозможно.
He says there is absolutely no way that the tomahawks against Russia will be used without involving the American personnel. He was saying the same about like British Storm Shadow missiles, Scalp missiles, whatever.
Это будет означать абсолютно новый, качественно новый этап эскалации, в том числе в отношениях между Россией и Соединенными Штатами.
And of course, he is saying that if the tomahawks are given to Ukraine, that will mean a new level of escalation between the Terrorussia and United States. He will be saying a lot of that, all right? He will be saying that a lot. Also, during the same press conference, we have another interesting video, another interesting comments coming from the internationally wanted war criminal Putin.
Министерство войны, у нас Министерство обороны.
He says, look at Americans, they have the Ministry of War, we have the Ministry of Defense. At the same time, guys, which country occupied more territory over the past 100 years, United States or like Russia? Please let me know in the chat. And I'm speaking like literally occupied and annexed, all right?
Мы из этого всегда исходили, и всегда исходим, и будем исходить.
We always consider this fact that we have the Ministry of Defense. And this is the reason why Russia is fighting like half a world away in like Syria, in Sudan. This is why we are attacking people in Caucasus. This is why we're launching drones in Denmark. This is why we are rupturing communication cables somewhere in the Baltic Sea, literally because Russia is defending itself. My God.
У нас нет агрессивных намерений в отношении третьих стран.
We don't have aggressive intentions regarding the other countries, he says. Putin literally says that he doesn't have like aggressive intentions towards other countries. Guys, he literally just confessed, all right, according to Sigmund Freud, he just confessed that he literally wants to dominate the world, all right? Because if you read Putin properly, this is exactly the way you should understand his words.
У нас Министерство обороны, и цель Министерства обороны – обеспечить безопасность российского государства и народов Российской Федерации.
He says we only have a Ministry of Defense, and the main goal of the Ministry of Defense of the Terrorist Federation is to ensure the safety and protection of Russia and like Russian nations. Russian nation in France, Russian nation in Germany, Russian nation in South Africa, Russian nation in Japan, and basically around the world.
Ну, а вот он дразнится, что бумажный тигр.
The host is like, but Trump is like teasing you, calling you a paper tiger.
Бумажный тигр. Я же сказал, что Россия все эти годы воюет не с ВСУ, не с Украиной.
And Putin basically retransmits the same bullshit he was saying all this time, and most of the Russian propagandists were saying all this time. He says, well, paper tiger, you can see that Ukraine is basically fighting all NATO countries all these years. Not just Ukraine, not just the armed forces of Ukraine, but all NATO bloc. That generally speaking is like 40 times wealthier than the destitute terrorist federation, because in among the whole NATO countries, like the state of Texas has more GDP than generates more GDP than the terrorist federation, and the schools in Texas don't fall apart, my dear friends. But he says like all this time we were fighting against the whole NATO army, from all around the world in Ukraine, where we didn't capture even a single major city since 2022.
Воюют практически со всеми странами НАТО. Значит, если говорить да, вы спросили, что происходит у нас на линии боевого соприкосновения.
He says, we are fighting against all the NATO countries, and let's talk about what is happening on the front lines.
Так вот, я сейчас к тиграм вернусь. Значит, у нас практически по всей линии боевого соприкосновения наши войска уверенно идут вперед.
He says, along the whole front line in Ukraine, which is, as you probably know, 1,500 kilometers long, he says the situation is that along the whole front line, our armies are steadily moving forward for 4 fucking years without capturing even a single major city. And well, maybe they kind of do, but like the steps they do are very, very tiny, considering that Russia is only capturing like several square kilometers a day along the whole front line. That is as long as like 1,500 kilometers. Such a progress. Oh my God. So, considering all that progress and considering that Russia already burned more than 1 million of its most healthy and combat-worthy and like labor-worthy population, how much time will they need to like, I don't know, approach, for example, Poltava region? I think it will take them something like 80 years, all right, considering the current dynamics. I think in like 80 years and sacrificing, I don't know, 50, 60 million people, they will finally crowd to the Poltava Oblast, where, I don't know, they will be fighting with Mosin Nagant rifles produced more than 100 years ago, I don't know, throwing stones, shit like that. Throwing their video cameras, guys. They will have so many video cameras, they will have so many, I don't know, gadgets to spread disinformation with, and they will be literally putting those in the big cannons and shooting them at Ukraine. That is something that will definitely happen, because Russian biggest weapon, as you can probably see, is Russian bullshit, Russian lies, Russian misinformation, as well as, unfortunately, imbeciles around the world, in Ukraine, on the West, in the United States, that accept Russian bullshit, that believe, what Putin is saying is true, that say that Russian army is steadily moving forward, it's undefeatable, it's dangerous. It will kill us all, right? Okay, my dear friends, I really gotta wrap it up because I gotta publish a new video on the UATV very, very soon. This one was surprisingly long episode, all right? But we will talk with you tomorrow. I will not sleep through the morning alert this time, I swear. I would like to say, my dear friends, big thank you to all the supporters of my channel. Big thanks to all the supporters of Ukraine, which is even more important than supporting my channel. And also big thanks to all the members. Big thanks to all the moderators, all the constant visitors of our chat. Thank you so much. It was really, really cool to see you, my friends. And I hope that everything will be fine with you throughout the day. Eat well, okay, it's important. Eat well, drink coffee, and we'll see you later. And as always, be safe. Bye-bye.